live everywhere on netrootsradio.com. David Waldman, Kagro, in the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Thursday, April 13th, 2023. Time for another show. Time, as it happens, for another Greg Dworkin absence. This is not Greg's fault. He had a bunch of routine, regular appointments. People are changing times on him. But I spoke to him yesterday, and although this means he's missing 2 shows in a row, this is a lot more painful for him than it is for you, or maybe it's not as painful for you as it is for me, having to do 2, and I thought maybe 3 solo shows in a row. It's not easy to fill all 2 hours entirely by yourself. Although, I make it look easy, don't I? Because every time the 2-hour mark comes around and I say, oh, we're not going to be able to finish this thing, I definitely want to tell you. Okay, well, anyway. I spoke to him yesterday, texted back and forth with him, and maybe we'll just say, what the hell? There's no reason why Friday has to be a solo show. It's just that he was usually taking the day off, but having taken 2 days away from the microphone, if not days off, per se, he's raring to go, champing at the bit, as you might say. And really, we shouldn't be putting a bit in his mouth. It seems cruel. But at any rate, he's interested in coming by Friday, because there's just a lot to talk about. So maybe we'll do things that way. In the meantime, certainly plenty to keep us busy. And man, there's a lot. For some reason, The Hill wants to be my best friend, I guess. And they're my favorite pen pal or something, except there's no pen involved. They're like, how many emails from The Hill are on the first page of my inbox here? I'm just going to check. And, I've been trying to get better about deleting things when I know I'm going to have no use for them and when I know it's junk. And I used to just not bother with deleting. Anyway, not your problem, but let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 Hill emails without scrolling. I guess this includes in the first page. The rest of the stuff is 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So that's among the first 50, I suppose, of the rest. Okay. Well, let's see. So almost half of my emails on the full first page if you scroll all the way down. That's, I have a text here I got to respond to. Okay. That's too bad. Forgotten item, for the son here. We'll see if I can get that over to the school after the show. Everyone wants to know. And, excuse me, everybody. Sorry. Taking care of home front business. What does The Hill want us to know? Does it matter? I don't know. They don't always have the greatest news sense. But they certainly work hard, sort of, in the sense that, I guess, pressing send on an email, or an automated email, or who knows, maybe AI chatbot is sending these emails. I'm just curious about what they want us to know. Versus what, say, Justice brings up in the morning. I notice his story reminders. I mean, I think you could probably guess that his story reminders are generally more relevant to the things we're interested in than what The Hill says. And his story reminders are about, well, I'll tell you the lines he uses. He loves to sort of put them in, I don't know what you would call this, almost like riddles in the morning, but just oblique references. He doesn't say, here's the news. He says, as he's checking in, is everything working correctly? As we're playing the prelude music, which I don't think goes out over the air, but who knows? I can't even remember anymore. Saying, Prelude says Trump sued Cohen for $500 million. Just don't call it witness intimidation. That's definitely on my radar, but I don't know that I actually put it aside in pocket. But now I feel like maybe, well, we should at least note it because it's a legal development in Trump world, and we try to keep abreast of those. But Now it seems like a little bit more of a story the way Justice is framed. But yeah, that's true. I only thought of it as, Trump sues everybody for everything. He's an idiot. Usually these suits go nowhere. The fact that he's angry at Michael Cohen should surprise no one. But the fact that he sued him for $500 million, well, Justice makes a good point. Is this the only sort of witness intimidation that's still left to him now that he's a powerless lump of jelly living down in Florida? Maybe. A good way of thinking of it, and that makes the story more relevant, in my view. The second thing is I played the actual intro to the show, which you do hear on the air. I'm positive of that part. The intro says, will the racist anti-Semite gun nut be sentenced to at least what they sentenced Reality Winner to? And then, of course, lets me know that all the levels are fine, everything's good. And, which racist anti-Semite gun nut should be sentenced to prison? There are many. And I happen to know which one it is because this one I definitely put aside. This is the one that everybody's talking about, and I think this is the one we got to get to first. Although, just out of curiosity, you want to compare news sense, the news nose, if you will, between The Hill, who are, somehow, they're probably generating more income doing this than we are. But I guess that involves just bombarding people with emails and social media posts, and it's kind of annoying. Whereas Justice just gets right to the point. Anyway, The Hill, let's see. The Hill's idea of what's in the news is, let's see, the first one chronologically, in reverse chronological order, the most recently received. News alert, Hunter Biden is out from the shadows. That doesn't sound good. And remember, these guys will be trying to both sides everything. Their AI chatbot hasn't figured out which person they're emailing and which one will I be interested in. I will not be interested in the Hunter Biden out from the shadows story unless it's to figure out, what the shadow is supposed to be. Anyway, what else? Reverse order. Oh, I should get rid of this thing from the Epic Times. Apparently one of those things you cannot unsubscribe from. And let's see, what else? News alert, 100 days in power, House GOP honeymoon may be over. Honeymoon, you think? All right, what else? The Hill's Morning Report, where the House GOP stands 100 days in. That sounds an awful lot like the one they emailed me again a few minutes later. How much time in between those two? 6:28 a.m. for the first one, which was the second one that we read. And then 8:02 a.m. they hit me again with another GOP 100 days story. What else? Court preserves access to abortion bill but tightens rules. There was a partial, I understand, I guess was it the Fifth Circuit must have taken up Kaczmarek's decision, and because it was stayed pending review, they gave it a cursory glance. They reversed him on something. I saw somebody today saying, well, he made like 20 plus errors of law. They reversed on one, but left a lot of the rest standing and ended up adding even more restrictions. And basically, they didn't do anybody any favors, which was the whole design of the play anyway. First of all, you steer the case to Kaczmarek. Kaczmarek's cases all go to the Fifth Circuit. And then it's a question of, does the Supreme Court take this up, and are they too embarrassed to continue to tighten the clamps on abortion rules? What else do they have to say? From the Hill thinking we're going to be interested in. Feinstein story. Definitely want to get to that one. Had that one on the radar yesterday and couldn't squeeze it in, but have been talking to Joan a little bit in the background about this because she's trying to decipher and untangle what's going on and find out what procedural hurdles we face. Feinstein, of course, has been out and absent, taking the best care of her health she can at this stage of the game, and has been away for, something like 60% of the votes during this the first couple months of the year. She's been absent from the Judiciary Committee where she still sits, and now it has begun holding up judicial nominations, which is, one of the few things that you can reliably get done in a closely divided Senate, and you don't have to rely on the Republicans in the House. And of course, the judiciary taking on even higher priority these days in the face of the ultra MAGA weirdos that we have sitting on the federal bench, the way the Republicans have engineered things that they can run pipelines through a couple of ideologues and then get them hotlined all the way to the Supreme Court. It's pretty important. But we'll talk about that, I'm sure, at some point. So the Hill, I think, is right on with that one. I'm just sort of curious what other things they want to. We may let them direct the show. Alvin Bragg sues Jim Jordan. That's out there. You know what? This is a great way of reminding myself of the various stories that we could get to, but things we can't fit in. It's a good lightning round. What else? Tim Scott's looming Trump challenge fuels GOP skepticism. Bah. I don't think I care about that one. More Feinstein stories. More about Bragg, although this one says Team Trump embraces Bragg indictment. I suppose that means as a fundraising tool. Here's the first story that Justice referred to. The Trump hits former fixer Michael Cohen with $500 million lawsuit. Maybe we'll read their story on that one if we want to get to it. I don't know. Inflation eases as corporate profits fall from record levels. I actually saw this one yesterday and I thought, I think I do want to mention this one. By the way, and ask economists which is the chicken and which is the egg here. Inflation eases as corporate profits fall from record levels. And there were a lot of people who were kind of scratching their heads and wondering, high inflation, they keep telling us, prices are inflating out of control. Consumer prices just skyrocketing. But at the same time, record-breaking corporate profits. And is it inflation that's driving this, or are corporations just saying, I don't know, we just keep raising prices and people keep paying them. We're just trying to test the elasticity of the market and see how much money we can make. That's not the same thing as inflation, really. Not in the traditional sense. And then all of a sudden, I don't know. Now it looks like corporate profits are falling slightly, but inflation is also dropping, and you start to wonder about the causality there at some point, I think. But the formulas that economists come up with for these things are probably complicated enough that I can't do it, and that's the reason they make them so complicated. I think the relationship seems pretty obvious on its face. Skipping down, just see what other things there are here from yesterday. Here are the 7 biggest revelations from the U.S. leaks so far. That's the story we're definitely going to get to. GOP largely silent on Texas ruling with party in a bind on abortion. We've certainly covered that concept. Consumer prices up 5% annually as inflation cools. That sounds like the same story as before. 2 million people fled America's big cities from 2020 to 2022. That probably has to do with all 2 million were from New York, and they moved to their vacation homes during COVID. And let's see, Tim Scott launches Presidential Exploratory Committee. That's the snoozer from before that we didn't want. And lastly, GOP, grandstanding or branding? That might even be an interesting article. Okay, so that gives you some idea of what the Hill thinks is important. I don't know why, it gives us a good roundup of what the news media universe is like. I think that's fair. And of course, they did hit on the big important story of the day. I'm going to start with the Washington Post coverage of it, which I think is the one everybody's leaning on. They must have done the legwork on this. And it is labeled an exclusive, if you're into those sorts of labels. Leaker of U.S. secret documents. We mentioned and only mentioned the other day that this had happened, and we were trying to get a handle on it. Leaker of U.S. secret documents worked on military base, friend says. All the commentary that I'm seeing on this on social media, making a long story short, but we're going to read the long story anyway because I think it's fairly important looking, is that this leaker differs from many of the latest leakers who had secret access for work reasons. Reality winner Edward Snowden, etc., both of whom, at least arguably, were interested in exposing what they believed to be abuses of power by, various actors in the U.S. government and military. And there are arguments about their methodologies, but generally speaking, at least in our political environs, an acknowledgement that, okay, yes, what they sought to uncover probably really was abusive and needed to be out in the open and discussed, even if their methodologies of bringing them to discussion were the subject of dispute. This guy seems to just have been a Yahoo a-hole by all commentary that I'm watching. That he basically had was a right-wing lunatic, anti-government type person, but of course drawing a salary from the government, no problems with that, and then revealing its secrets, mostly to look like a cool guy with his buddies online. And that doesn't seem very cool. I think somebody on social media on Mastodon saying, behold, America's least honorable leaker. And therefore, I think stemming from that angle, Justice's comments about how, reality winner, they came down on her like a ton of bricks. She goes to prison. We'll see what happens to this guy who can't even, plead any sort of altruistic motive in all of this. This is, I guess, I don't know, this will probably be the first installment in what will end up being a series of stories from the Washington Post. Leaker of U.S. secret documents worked on military base, friend says. They label this the Discord leaks. The online group that received hundreds of pages of classified material included foreigners, members tell the Post. Members of what? Members of this Discord chat group, essentially. Discord being the preferred gamers discussion platform. They use it for all sorts of things, message trading like an online database, but also I think they communicate live voice over Discord fairly frequently. So there's discussion that goes on as people are, very well. My kids use it for discussion while playing, multiplayer online video games. They just actually have phone chats over it when they're not playing anything. They watch movies together over it. It's very popular. Teens and younger 20s and gamers of all sorts, and was among, I think, the platforms that were viewed as exploitable by Steve Bannon and his gang as they looked to turn otherwise non-political, apolitical young people, whether knowingly, wittingly or not, into right-wing ideologues. And guess what? That has happened. Shane Harris and Samuel Oakford report on this exclusive story that everybody's pointing to with their own commentary. This is where it all begins. The man behind a massive leak of U.S. government secrets that has exposed spying on allies, which, we do, revealed the grim prospects for Ukraine's war with Russia. That's how it sort of came to our attention earlier. That was the backstory, was that some of the information that he released was detrimental to Ukraine's efforts to resist the Russian invasion, and that wasn't going to go well. And it ignited diplomatic fires for the White House, and I guess it was about that. I assume the circulation of grim assessments of Ukraine's chances. But, what are anybody's chances against a Russian invasion usually? Grim. Can you win? Yeah, it can be done. Is it grim to win that way? Yeah. So, fair enough. Anyway, well, it turns out that this idiot who did this thing is a young, charismatic gun enthusiast who shared highly classified documents with a group of far-flung acquaintances searching for companionship. Ah, the love boat of the internet. Amid the isolation of the pandemic. How sad. So, incels who were upset that they were locked in because there was a major pandemic. And also then all the restrictions were lifted, but they were antisocial losers and they didn't go out because they're like me. And, but then they hadn't progressed in life far enough to be married shut in, where you have your companions with you. Anyway, united by their mutual love of guns, military gear, and God, or at least what they thought of as God, the group of roughly 24, mostly men and boys, formed an invitation-only clubhouse in 2020 on Discord, an online platform popular with gamers. But they paid little attention last year when the man some called OG posted a message laden with strange acronyms and jargon. The words were unfamiliar, and few people read the long note, one of the members explained, but he revered OG, the elder leader of their tiny tribe, who claimed to know secrets that the government withheld from ordinary people. The young member read OG's message closely, and the hundreds more that he said followed on a regular basis for months. They were, he recalled, what appeared to be near verbatim transcripts of classified intelligence documents that OG indicated he had brought home from his job on a, quote, military base, which the member declined to identify. OG claimed he spent at least some of his day inside a secure facility that prohibited cell phones and other electronic devices, which could be used to document the secret information housed on government computer networks or spooling out from printers. He annotated some of the hand-typed documents, the member said, translating arcane intel speak for the uninitiated, such as explaining that NOFORN, N-O-F-O-R-N, meant the information in the document was so sensitive. How sensitive was it? It was so sensitive that it must not be shared with foreign nationals. No foreign. Get it? Okay. OG told the group he toiled for hours writing up the classified documents to share with his companions in the Discord server he controlled. The gathering spot had been a pandemic refuge, particularly for teen gamers locked in their houses and cut off from their real-world friends. The members swapped memes, offensive jokes, and idle chit-chat. They watched movies together. That's what my kids are doing. Uh-oh, maybe they have classified information. Joked around and prayed. I'm pretty sure that's not happening on my son's Discord server, but whatever. But OG also lectured them about world affairs and secretive government operations. He wanted to, quote, keep us in the loop, the member said, and seemed to think that his insider knowledge would offer the others protection from the troubled world around them. I don't think so. It actually got them in trouble. He's a smart person. He knew what he was doing when he posted these documents, of course. These weren't accidental leaks of any kind, the member said. Sounds like the kid has a good handle on it. The transcribed documents OG posted traversed a range of sensitive subjects that only people who had undergone months-long background checks would be authorized to see. Oh, well, they failed on this guy. These were top-secret reports about the whereabouts and movements of high-ranking political leaders and tactical updates on military forces. Ooh, tactical. Geopolitical analysis, insights into foreign governments' efforts to interfere with elections. Oh, if you could think it, it was in those documents. In those initial posts, OG had given his fellow members a small sip of the torrent of secrets that was to come. When rendering hundreds of classified files by hand proved too tiresome, he began posting hundreds of photos of documents themselves, an astonishing cache of secrets that had been steadily spilling into public view over the past week, disrupting U.S. foreign policy and aggravating America's allies. This account of how detailed intelligence documents intended for an exclusive circle of military leaders and government decision-makers found their way into and then out of OG's closed community, which was always the idea. It wasn't going to do him any good to tell a bunch of teenagers this, right? Well, it's all based in part on several lengthy interviews with the Discord group member, this young teen here, who spoke to the Washington Post on condition of anonymity. He is under 18 and was a young teenager when he met OG, who was grooming him, obviously. The Post obtained consent from the member's mother to speak to him and to record his remarks on video. He asked that his voice not be obscured. Is that right? He asked that his voice not be obscured. Okay. His account was corroborated by a second member who read many of the same classified documents shared by OG and who spoke on condition of anonymity. Both members said they know OG's real name as well as the state where he lives and works, but declined to share that information while the FBI is hunting for the source of the leaks. They may have shared that with the FBI, but maybe not with the Post. The investigation is in its early stages, and the Pentagon has set up its own internal review led by a senior official. An interagency effort has been stood up focused on assessing the impact these photographed documents could have on U.S. national security and on our allies and partners. Pentagon Deputy Press Secretary Sabrina Singh said in a statement. Discord said in a statement that it is cooperating with law enforcement and has declined to comment further. The Post also reviewed approximately 300 photos of classified documents, most of which have not been made public. Some of the text documents OG is said to have written out, an audio recording of a man the two group members identified as OG speaking to his companions, and chat records and photographs that show OG communicating with them on the Discord server. The young member was impressed by OG's seemingly prophetic ability to forecast major events before they became headline news. Things, quote, only someone with this kind of high clearance, unquote, would know. Although, quite honestly, I just by reading the news each morning, I find, well, what the effect of a show like this one is it ends up looking or sounding to listeners like I have some finger on the pulse of the news beat of America, or at least to some people. But others of you who actually read the news before the show comes on say, oh yeah, I know that. I read that too. And that's the secret, where there's no secret. So I don't know. It depends. I mean, clearly he had some classified information. I do have some questions about how much of the truly critical stuff he would have been able to unscramble in his mind and communicate to teenagers in such a way that they would understand that they were learning about events that had either, well, if that hadn't been reported yet, I guess. And I guess it might look to them like he was predicting the future when in fact he was simply telling them what had happened before it reached the news headlines, which is not a particularly difficult thing to do. Or they may already have reached the news headlines, but these kids hadn't read the news. And then a couple days later, when the story is bigger and you can't avoid it, you say, oh, yeah, I already heard about that one, actually. But it wasn't a prediction per se, but a readout of what had actually happened in the world. Perhaps a few hours earlier than they would have found out about it by the news. I don't know. We'll read on with this and see just how serious this gets after this break. It's not a great story. I mean, it is a good story. Well reported, anyway. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Ed Roots Radio. So you get what I meant on the exit there. It's not a good story. It's not a good story for America, but it's a good story all by itself and abstract and well reported. I'm not saying that the story is untrue or poorly reported or anything like that. It's a bad thing that happened. It's a story about a bad thing. There you go. Anyway, so where we left off was this young kid was impressed by OG's seemingly prophetic ability to forecast major events before they became headline news, because only a guy with really cool clearance would know this stuff. He was, by his own account, enthralled with OG, who he said was in his early to mid-20s. He's fit, he's strong, he's armed, he's trained, just about everything you can expect out of some sort of crazy movie, the member says. So in other words, action hero type guy. Although, all he did was talk on Discord. Fit, strong, armed. I don't know. It's a little groomy sounding if you ask me. Anyway, In a video seen by The Post, the man who the member said is OG stands at a shooting range, wearing safety glasses, that's for losers, don't be safe, and ear coverings, tactical, and holding a large rifle. He yells a series of racial and anti-Semitic slurs into the camera, then fires several rounds at a target. And as you know, that is very fit, strong, and trained thing to do, is that they teach you now before you fire your weapon. You have to yell racial epithets and express your anti-Semitism because of how tactical it is. But that's one of the problems. And there's many different kinds of grooming, by the way. It doesn't necessarily mean that OG was priming these young men for sexual encounters with them directly, but also, grooming them just in terms of worldview. Like, what's the name of the loser weirdo, who they arrested in, Romania not that long ago, right? Who, essentially was doing the same thing, teaching young teenage kids to worship him because he was a, MMA fighter and fit and strong and armed, and he has vroom vroom cars that go many fast. And he gets all the chicks, and so I will too. And, I don't know, whatever it is, but it's part of the game for these guys is being worshipped by other young dudes, which is a little weird if you're really all about the ladies. But apparently they also, it's a weird interlocking interface they have going on here. Well, let's see now, if the ladies see that all the young boys think I'm awesome, then they'll think I'm awesome too. And it's just a self-reinforcing feedback loop. And maybe, I don't know, maybe if I also groom these guys enough and they get any hot chicks themselves, they'll pass them to me and I can sex traffic them, I guess is what this guy was doing. Because he was arrested for the sex trafficking, don't forget. Anyway, sounds like this guy, I don't know, may have been operating in a similar vein, just psychologically, whether he was operating that way physically or not, I couldn't tell you. But anyway, at the very least, he was, I guess, trying to teach these guys that one of the things you do as a strong, tough guy is be racist and anti-Semitic. And, that's bad too. Anyway, the member seemed drawn to OG's bravado and his skill with weapons. He felt a certain kinship with a man he described as, quote, like an uncle. Yeah, like the uncle you don't allow to, be with your kids alone. And on another occasion as a father figure. One of those father figures you arrest because they molest their children. I was one of very few people in the server that was able to understand that these documents were legitimate, the member said, setting himself apart from the others who mostly ignored OG's posts. Which is an interesting dynamic in all this too, is again, where does this guy bring his stuff? Mr. Strong, tough guy, grizzled and wizened in the ways of the world, and the only one who understood true nature of international events and was a hero and action figure, is bringing this material to who? To teenage kids who mostly don't understand it, don't care, and mostly ignore it. He's not arranging international meetings, Mission Impossible style, with Job on the Channel Tunnel train and meeting people in Hong Kong or, wherever else, Vietnam, I don't know. Give me an exotic location. The Seychelles, where you could pull off, actual high stakes international espionage, because of course, those people, if you bring them this and tell them it's high-level stuff that you can't get anywhere else, and then they see it and they're like, I already know this, they'll kill you and dump the body, and, why deal with you? I don't know. Any number of things could happen. But I notice, Mr. Bravado is telling the teenage boys about his high-level intelligence, which, by most reports, it really was serious intelligence. What's the point of telling a bunch of teenage boys, if not basically just to groom them, or perhaps in the hopes that one of them will take the fall for the espionage later on? I don't really know. But yeah, I noticed that Mr. International Action Hero has no international contacts. He's just telling a bunch of bored teenagers about this stuff. Anyway, it felt like I was on top of Mount Everest, he said. And this is a very interesting psychological look at what this kind of stuff does to these kids, right? If they don't understand it and they don't care about it, if they never care and it doesn't register with them, I guess it doesn't do them any good. But it doesn't do, this guy any particular harm either to leak it to them, so why not? But when it works, it, converts these teenagers into, cult acolytes, I guess. And they just think he's the greatest guy in the world. And who knows what they'd be willing to do for him, whether it's help him sell the material he has for financial gain, or traffic in them, or in girls they might bring him, or boys they might bring him, or themselves, or I don't really know exactly what he's after, but he's clearly interested in building, an army of young followers who regard him as a hero and will pretty much do whatever he asks. I don't know whether he ever gets to the ask, but you see what it does psychologically to the kid. I felt like I was on top of Mount Everest. I felt like I was above everyone else to some degree, and that I knew stuff that they didn't, which is, again, super dangerous. Also, that happens to be the particular drug that QAnon sells people too. It's just that the stuff that they think they know is actually false. So imagine the ego boost of finding out that you actually know stuff that's true, when millions of other people who wield a considerable amount of strange power in the world by sharing false information. Imagine knowing the true stuff. It's like QAnon on steroids, and who knows what you could get a kid like that to do, or who knows what they might be motivated to do on their own. If they felt like, rightly or wrongly, they had some sort of secret arcane knowledge about how the world really worked, and everybody else told them, no, that isn't true, or that's crazy, or whatever. But you also, bring them up in this atmosphere of, what's awesome? Being strong and trained and armed and yelling racial epithets and being anti-Semitic and firing machine guns. And, and you instill them with this feeling like I was above everyone else to some degree, and I knew stuff that they didn't. Like, you're the Illuminati, and you might as well kill or otherwise eliminate those who are beneath you, like the people about whom your hero screams before firing the machine gun. You can see, how dangerous this can get. Next section, a tight-knit family, none of which are other intelligence operatives, apparently. It's just a weird family for this guy to pick, is all I'm saying. The member met OG about 4 years ago on a different server for fans of Oxide, a popular YouTuber who streams videos about, you'll never guess, guns, body armor, and military hardware. 'Cause that stuff's awesome, man. He said a group of avid members found the server too crowded and wanted a quieter place to talk about video game tactics, so they broke off into their own small group that they could groom. More like-minded Oxide fans joined the private Discord server, which came to be named Thug Shaker Central, and whose membership OG would effectively control as the administrator. That's the case with most of these things, but that does sound a little more sinister, doesn't it? And it really is, given what he was trying to do with it. We all grew very close to each other, like a tight-knit family, the member said. We depended on each other. That would be codependence, right? He said that other members, and OG especially, counseled him during bouts of depression and helped to steady him emotionally. There was no lack of love for each other. OG was the undisputed leader. Little Peter Pan syndrome going on here. The member described him as strict. He enforced a, quote, pecking order and expected the others to read closely the classified information he had shared. When their attention waned, he got angry. Late last year, a peeved OG fired off a message to all the members of the server. He had spent nearly an hour every day writing up these long and drawn-out posts in which he'd often add annotations and explanations for stuff that we normal citizens would not understand, the member said. His would-be pupils were more interested in YouTube videos about battle gear. He got upset, and he said on multiple occasions, if you guys aren't going to interact with them, I'm going to stop sending them. So, I mean, it's interesting. Like, what he's after is the accolades of teenage boys. For some strange reason, he's more interested in hearing about his efforts from teenage boys than from the actual, real, tough, strong, trained, ruthless international actors who would be interested in this intelligence. He wasn't really strong enough, brave enough, whatever, to deal with them, but lording it over teenage boys, well, That was what motivated him for some strange reason. That's when OG changed tactics. Rather than spend his time copying documents by keyboard, he took photographs of the genuine articles and dropped them in the server. These were more vivid and arresting documents than the plain text renderings. Some featured detailed charts of battlefield conditions in Ukraine and highly classified satellite images of the aftermath of Russian missile strikes on Ukrainian electrical facilities. Others sketched the potential trajectory of North Korean ballistic nuclear missiles that could reach the United States. Another featured photographs of the Chinese spy balloon that floated across the country in February, snapped from eye level, probably by a U-2 spy plane, along with a diagram of the balloon and the surveillance technology attached to it. That would probably interest them because they had heard about that thing. OG shared several documents a week beginning late last year. And by the way, this is just straight up espionage. That's Jeffrey Epstein conducting espionage. And that's probably a good term for it, considering how he's really spending his time with all these young guys. Anyway, like I say, it's straight up espionage. He works in a military base in a skiff where you're not supposed to bring your cell phone. And he just, I guess, did anyway and took a bunch of pictures of things and just started sending it out. I mean, it's just straight up spying. Anyway, why he's doing it is weird and different, but it is just straight up spying. Let's see. So he shared several documents a week beginning late last year. Posting pictures to the server took less time. He just was lazy on top of everything else. But it exposed OG to greater risk. In the background of some images, they could see items and furniture that they recognized from the room where OG spoke to them via video on the Discord channel. The kind of clues that could prove useful for federal investigators. The dramatic and yet nonchalant presentation also reminded the group that OG could lay his hands on some of the most closely guarded intelligence in the U.S. government. If you had classified documents, you'd want to flex at least a little bit, like, hey, I'm the big guy, the member said. There is a little bit of showing off to friends, but as well as wanting to keep us informed. But again, it's all showing off to friends. You wanting to keep us informed. What good does it do to keep a group of 20 teenagers locked in their houses and who want to just watch gun videos informed of anything? International affairs, one of the 20 kids is actually somewhat interested in it, but probably more because he's thinking a guy who has information like that and is strong and tough probably gets laid. I wonder if I could get laid too by being like this. And, OG probably was like, you could, come on over to my house for whatever reason. Anyway, I don't know. Just saying, it is a little bit strange. And, I think that is interesting too. The idea that he moves to photos is pretty interesting. I guess he really is just trying to he's trying to get more information out and trying to stop spending so much time transcribing them. But he becomes a bolder spy, but again, for no particular reason other than the admiration of a bunch of teenage boys. It seems like there's either more to the story or this is just an extremely odd story. In a sense, OG had created a virtual mirror image of the secretive facility where he spent his working hours. Inside the Discord server, he was the ultimate arbiter of secrecy, and he allowed his companions to read truths that, quote, normal citizens could not. I'm just interested in why he chose the people to see it that, that he did. Next up, a breach of secrecy. The photographs of printed secret documents now seen by millions may offer clues to the federal agents searching for OG. Reality Winner, who leaked secret National Security Agency documents to the news website The Intercept in 2017, was compromised by secret markings on printouts that helped narrow the search. OG's documents looked to have been printed on ordinary paper and were creased after having been folded in four. Sometimes the photographs OG took of the documents appeared to have been taken over a bed. Items such as Gorilla Glue, a scope manual, and nail clippers appeared in the margins. Other previously unreported images reviewed by the Post show printed documents lying on top of a glowing red keyboard, the brand of which I'm sure is identifiable, and how many of these items were sold in X state and shipped recently, and I think they'll find them pretty quickly. The breadth of the military and intelligence reports was extensive. For months, OG regularly uploaded page after page of classified U.S. assessments, offering a window into how deeply American intelligence had penetrated the Russian military, showing that Egypt had planned to sell Russia tens of thousands of rockets, and suggesting that Russian mercenaries had approached Turkey, a NATO ally, to buy weapons to fight against Ukraine. Although I do feel like I read most of those stories in the newspaper at some point. At least one of the documents appeared to have been printed from Intellipedia, a data sharing system that intelligence agencies use to collaborate and post reports and articles. The documents were another lesson for younger members in how OG thought the world really worked. The member said OG wasn't hostile to the U.S. government. Well, apparently he was, because he was a spy, and he insisted that he was not working on behalf of any country's interests. He's not a Russian operative. He's not a Ukrainian operative, the member said, or at least he didn't want you to think so. The room on the server where he posted the documents was called Bear versus Pig, meant to be a snide jab at Russia and Ukraine, and an indication that OG took no sides in the conflict. He was just interested in the adoration of teenage boys. But OG had a dark view of the government, and he couldn't have been elsewise. Otherwise, he would have taken his job more seriously and his life more seriously, quite honestly. The young member said he spoke of the United States, and particularly law enforcement and the intelligence community, as a sinister force that sought to suppress its citizens and keep them in the dark. He ranted about government overreach, which would no doubt include, in his mind, arresting him for doing these illegal things. You know, it's a little bit of inoculation too. And if I ever get clapped in irons and hauled away, well, I told you that's about the overreach of the government, the bunch of tyrants who are taking me away just for telling you how the world really works. It's a little culty. OG told his online companions that the government hid horrible truths from the public, and that's probably true. He claimed, according to the members, that the government knew in advance that a white supremacist intended to go on a shooting rampage at a Buffalo supermarket in May of 2022. The attack left 10 dead, all of them black, and wounded 3 more. OG said the federal law enforcement officials let the killings proceed so they could argue for increased funding, a baseless notion that the member said he believes and considers an example of OG's penetrating insights about the depth of government corruption. And there we see not much difference from QAnon after all. What a surprise that loser basement guy, though given access to genuine classified material because of his job on a military base, whatever that job may be. I don't know whether they have any more details about that later on, but whatever reason, there's different things that can be done with different levels of intelligence. And I mean that in both senses, right? Like if you get military/governmental intelligence and you have an intelligence level yourself, your actual mental intelligence, you have the mental intelligence to unravel it and interpret it. It depends, how intelligent are you? Are you the kind of person who actually does know what's going on in the world? Or are you a low-level functionary who has to have access to classified material in order to perform the drudge work for the people who are supposed to really be interpreting the stuff? And, as they say, a little bit of knowledge can be, a dangerous thing. And he understands the mechanics of what's being expressed, but he doesn't really, grasp the fuller picture of things, and instead comes away with a conspiratorial view of the world. I mean, to have access to all of this intelligence, and what you come away from it with is, 1, I can use it to make a bunch of teenage boys worship me, and 2, it means that the government knew about one of these mass shootings and it was a false flag operation. Alex Jones, you've kind of failed the intelligence test there. And in my view, you're not going to be able to redeem yourself after something like that. So, a doofus that had functionary level unfortunately, access to a lot of information that a smart person could have done a considerable. Thank God he wasn't smart enough to do that much more damage with it. I mean, damage is being done mostly because of the leakage from beyond the Discord server. But again, I mean, the overarching takeaway for me from all this is, what does he do directly with the information that he has? Mr. Awesome, international hero, spy, tough guy who understands the way the world really works, does nothing to change the way the world really works, but he does put 20 teenage boys in his thrall with that information. People are weird. They have strange motivations. Anyway, so, okay, not that much different from QAnon when all is said and done, except that occasionally they got a hold of information that was real and true and still managed to draw conclusions from it that were dumb and false. There you go. How smart is this group? About that smart. And, some of it sounds actually like the kid is kind of smart, but is too young to figure out the rest of the stuff, and you can blame it on age. And maybe you can blame it on OG's age too. I don't know. But they're just not, I don't know. They don't have it together to know the value of what they have and what they actually could be doing with it. So instead, they trade it for cool stuff. Whatever that stuff may be. OG's group itself had a dark side. The Discord server's eventual name, Thug Shaker Central, was a racist allusion and signaled to members that they were free to hurl epithets and crude jokes. That'll happen among young kids. The young member expressed some regret for their behavior, but seemed to shrug off the offensive remarks as a clumsy attempt at, humor, of course. It was not a fascist recruiting server, he told the Post. A son I beg to differ. It was, in fact, a fascist recruiting server. You just didn't know it because part of the game is to hide from you that you're being recruited by fascists so that you don't, look up the definition of fascism and then say, wait a minute, that's bad. I don't want to be recruited that way. But, okay, that's the game, is to kind of hide the ball from you. It works on lots of people. It works on smart people occasionally, so I don't feel too bad about that. Anyway, it's good that you feel bad about the racism. Maybe there's hope for you. One thing members were not supposed to do was talk about the secrets OG had shared with them, including the classified documents. Don't tell your parents. Don't tell your whatever. Don't. Okay. That's usually a rule of weirdo cults and grooming situations. Yes, it just so happened this included intelligence information, which, again, what is the point of telling 20 teenagers this stuff, particularly if it doesn't interest them very much? He was dying for them to tell somebody about what he was showing them. He wanted to get caught? I don't know. He wanted to be the famous cool guy, but I don't know why he thought, well, whatever. Most people in the server were smart enough as to kind of realize that they shouldn't be posted anywhere else, the member said. And yet the group contained foreign citizens, including from Russia and Ukraine, who would actually recognize some of these things and realize the value of them and carry them forward, or have them discovered without their knowledge on their own computers. Who knows when you're talking about Russians? Okay. So, yes, some of the members were foreign citizens, including from Russia and Ukraine. And the members said a defiance of the no foreign warning printed across the top of so many documents OG shared. The member estimated that the server hosted people from Europe, Asia, and South America, just about every walk of life. Of the roughly 25 active members who had access to the Bear vs. Pig channel, about half were located overseas, the member said. So it's not just a group of teenagers, but a weird international collection of teenagers. And I guess this is, the point. They have moved on from that point, from the Discord refuge for pandemic lock-ins, I guess. Otherwise, it's sort of like, what sort of, I don't know, maybe they can still offer each other companionship and emotional support despite the fact that they're on different continents. It's all done remotely. I suppose that would work. But again, a weird group to pick. And still, as I was reading that sentence, I thought, oh, well, maybe I misunderstood how big the server really was. No, it's still about 25, mostly teenage boys strewn across Europe, Asia, and South America. What an odd place to, decide to share your information. Anyway, if you really didn't want it shared outside of that circle, it's kind of weird. The ones who seemed most interested in the classified material claimed to be from mostly Eastern Bloc and then those post-Soviet countries, he said. The Ukrainians had interest as well. That would be one of them, of course, which the member chalked up to interest in the war ravaging their homeland. That's a great conclusion, boy. For years, U.S. counterintelligence officials have eyed gaming platforms as a magnet for spies. I wonder why. Russian intelligence operatives have been suspected of befriending gamers who they believe work for intelligence agencies and encouraging them to divulge classified information, a senior U.S. official said, speaking on condition of anonymity to discuss sensitive information. Is that far-fetched? Well, I don't know. Isn't that exactly kind of what happened here? I mean, OG thinks he's in control of everything because he set up the server. But why did he set up the server? He set up the server to talk about things he wanted to talk about, plus gaming with people that he knew to be on other continents, and some of them from Eastern Europe. And they just said, hey, man, we just want to talk about gaming. And he said, well, I also want to talk about this classified information that I have to divulge. And they did not seem to object very strongly to his divulgence of this information. And, it would be pretty amazing, by the way, if they eventually established that, yes, these were, in fact, Russian intelligence operatives posing as young kids and talking OG into starting his own server and then divulging all that information. And then Mr. Tough Guy, I know the way the world works, I'm savvy, I have access to all this intelligence and I'm trained, etc., just simply walked straight into the trap and gave them exactly what they were looking for, all the while thinking, I'm the one who knows what's really going on here. I'm the one who's mentally strong and tough and prepared. Nobody manipulates me except for all the people who are manipulating me, but who I believe I am manipulating instead. Aha! As shown by the gold-plated nail clipper that's in the corner of one of my pictures, I am sitting on a mountain of wealth and power and success. And, all right, it's starting to become clear what's happening here. I know, we're giving over the whole show to something okay, there's many other things going on, but this does seem an intriguing story, doesn't it? We'll be right back with even more of it after this. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Here, welcome really to the Washington Post reporting on the weirdo who leaked all this stuff show. I know it means we're not getting to some other things, but it's only been 1 hour on this stupid story. But I don't know. It's intriguing to me, and trying to unravel it and sort of get in the heads of the people who are doing this stuff. And they're probably doing this over at the FBI too, in an effort to try to identify exactly who the guy is. Anyway, I think they must have a pretty good idea by now, based on this story and the knowledge that the other kids have of him. Anyway, where were we here? Oh, yes, right. Eastern Bloc Soviet countries where these other kids were from. Ukrainians had an interest, which the member chalked up to their interest in the war ravaging their homeland. Yeah, that would probably do it. For years, U.S. counterintelligence, oh yes, we did this one. Counterintelligence officials advised gaming platforms as a magnet for spies, and that's exactly what it sounds like sort of happened here. Or it would be very easy to think that it fits that description, even if it didn't happen in exactly that way. But viewed in a certain way, isn't that exactly what happened? Russian intelligence operatives have been suspected of befriending gamers who they believe work for intelligence agencies, and it seems like that's what happened here, and encouraging them to divulge classified information. So, okay. Who does that come from? A senior U.S. official who speaks on condition of anonymity to discuss sensitive information. Although, quite honestly, I think probably we could have told you that. And we didn't, but you want to hear that from an authoritative source. Fine. We could have told you that because authoritative sources have told newspaper reporters before and have said as much, and we've read it and we absorbed it. We would just be restating what maybe even that very source was telling people before. So it's not like we figured that out. It's not clear whether any of those efforts have been successful, except for this particular incident, which appears to indicate exactly that. But because we don't know for sure that OG didn't come up with the idea all by himself to set up the Discord server and then pick who was going to be in it later on and didn't or knew full well that they were Russian operatives or whatever. There could be some wrinkle in there, but it does sound like that's exactly what happened. So it's not clear whether any of those efforts have been successful. Wink, wink, I think this one was. But if foreign operatives finagled an invitation to OG's server, they would have been free to view the documents and make copies of them, as some members did. Which is another way of saying it's not clear whether any of those efforts have been successful, but only because we don't know for sure whether some of the people who were on OG's servers and photographed them are, in fact, Russian operatives, as opposed to genuinely Russian teenagers whose parents may be Russian operatives or who may have no relationship whatsoever to Russian operatives, but then ended up sharing the information either in an effort to set themselves up as an OG as well, but the information was passed on to people who were posing as teenagers but were really Russian operatives, or they were just, there was no middleman, and some of the teenagers who were supposedly enthralled to OG were in fact Russian operatives. We don't know how many layers there were. But what we do know is OG put them on the server, and at no one's, quote unquote, no one else's behest but his own, the power of his own mind drove him to do this. And then the information ended up in the hands of Russian operatives. But clearly he was never manipulated because his mind is above all the rest of you normal civilians. Same effing story of espionage. Always. Every time. Is my guess, because I'm not a counterintelligence operative. But my feeling is, I bet if you interviewed some counterintelligence operatives about it and they didn't want to blow the case, and they were free to talk to you and all those loose ends were wrapped up, if you could get them to speak to you, I think, frankly about it, they would say, I've seen this 100 times. Every time. What gets people caught is the belief that they're the one true god of espionage or whatever the hell it is that they're doing. And, then, and they end up walking right into a trap. The dangerous ones are the ones who do it quietly on the down low and keep doing it successfully forever, and we never find out about it, I would guess. But my supposition is that this is the same story over and over again, and it's almost sad to see, but then you really don't care about the people in the end, so it's not that sad. It's not happy. It's still bad. But you don't care about locking them up and throwing away the key because they were idiots to begin with. And now they're just dangerous idiots who are getting people killed in exchange for what they think maybe is a chance at more sex. That's what motivates is about as much. Well, it motivates a lot of things. Motivates a lot of spying. Sometimes people think it's the money, but it's usually that they're trading the money for sex in one way or another. Or, I don't know. It's what drove the major formative event of United States history, the Civil War, as slave owners. The economic system that's dependent on slavery. Well, yeah, yada, yada, yada. You keep concubines in your backyard and you want to keep it that way. Isn't that what's really driving it? Well, of course, we have to get the cotton harvested. Yeah. Secondary for you. As long as the money keeps rolling in and you can keep the concubines, who cares? The money comes from cotton. Okay, I need slaves to bring in the cotton too, right? But my first interest, you see. All right. It really was a very peculiar institution. Anyway, for years, that was the thing we got hung up on, that they were suspecting that OG was pretty much the same story they'd always seen, and lo and behold, he was. All right. Now, the server sprouts a leak. We're going to get down to this part of it here. All winter, OG uploaded documents to the server for no particular reason, I guess. No one talked about sharing them elsewhere. Then, unbeknown to the group, because everyone's innocent, on February 28th, another teenage user from the Thug Shaker Central server began posting several dozen photographs showing classified documents on another Discord server affiliated with the YouTuber wow underscore Mao. Wow Mao. All right. Not really sure exactly what the name means right up front. Mao Zedong, perhaps, and whether that's a Chinese Communist Party member or somebody using the name ironically. I don't know. Maybe we'll discover that as we read on. Some of the documents offered detailed assessments of Ukraine's defense capabilities and showed how far U.S. intelligence could see into Russia's military command. And by the way, it's all okay because OG mentally declassified all these things. And although he's not universally recognized as president of the United States at the time, he is, mentally above all of us anyway. So it's okay. You can be assured. All right. On March 4th, 10 documents appeared on Minecraft Earth Map, a Discord server focused on the popular video game. A user operating the account that posted the smaller tranche of images told the post they obtained them on Wow Mao. Secret and top secret documents were now available to thousands of Discord users, but the leak wouldn't come to the attention of U.S. authorities for another month. Right. Why would it? But it's interesting. And I wonder whether, by the way, all of these people who were probably either favorably inclined already or were being groomed to become favorably inclined to Trump and Trump world were shown these things in the middle of the Pervolago documents crisis, almost as a way of saying, it's not really such a big deal. Classified documents leak and are floated around and shown around all the time. For instance, here's a bunch, if you keep stealing them and sharing them, then yeah, it's a common occurrence. That doesn't mean either that the Pervolago documents situation wasn't bad or that you're making it any better by adding a second wrong in an attempt to make a right. But we don't know whether that drove any of it. So secret and top secret documents were now available to thousands, but the U.S. authorities didn't catch on for another month. Meanwhile, OG stopped sharing images in the middle of March. On April 5th, classified documents assessing the war in Ukraine were posted on Russian Telegram channels to the message platform 4chan. Yeah, they're back. And began migrating to Twitter. Yeah, great job, Elon Musk. One image showing a March 1st Ukraine status update had been crudely doctored to inflate the number of Ukrainian casualties and downplay those on the Russian side. That would be Russian intelligence operatives at work. The next day, shortly before the New York Times first reported on the leak, OG came into the server frantic, which is unusual for him, the member said. He said something had happened, and he prayed to God, that'll make it all better, that this event would not happen, but now it's in God's hands. And I wonder if the event is, I'm about to be caught. For all OG's disdain for the federal government, the member said there was no indication that he was acting in what he thought was the public interest by exposing official secrets. This, by the way, the opening paragraph of the section entitled Not a Whistleblower. So that ain't good. The classified documents were identified only to benefit his online family, the member said. I would definitely not call him a whistleblower. I would not call OG a whistleblower in the slightest, he said, resisting comparisons to Edward Snowden, who shared classified documents about government surveillance with journalists. Remarkably, the member said he has been in touch with OG in the past few days, even as an FBI manhunt is underway, and the Pentagon launches its own inquiry into the leaks. After shuttering the Thug Shaker Central server, OG moved the community to another server to communicate with his online family. He, quote, seemed very confused and lost as to what to do, the member said. Isn't that amazing that Mr. Tough, strong, armed, trained, wizened guy, as soon as the government actually finds out, oh, this is happening, we can bring this whole thing to a crashing halt. We can bring a ton of bricks down on you. Well, he wasn't all that strong, wise, or capable or composed at that point. He was, in fact, quite panicked that his little playground, not only was his little playground invaded and interrupted, but it was interrupted by players who were bigger, stronger, wiser, and able to bring more to bear, far more to bear, than he ever could, have entered the chat. And now the chat has to end, because I'm about to get my ass kicked. Wow. All right. He's fully aware of what's happening because of how super awesome and clued in he is. He's fully aware of what's happening and what the consequences may be. He's just not sure how to go about solving this situation. He seems pretty distraught about it, and that's because it ends in lethal injection. In his final message to his companions, OG admonished them to, quote, keep low, because tactical, keep low, and delete any information that could possibly relate to him. Screw the country, screw the allies, screw the other millions of people who might die as a result of all this. It's him you need to protect, the member said. That included any copies of the classified documents OG had shared. I take it all back. Now the feds are onto me. I hide everything. What a strong, tough international hero figure. When it dawned on them that OG was in grave peril and intended to disappear, the members of Thug Shaker Central full on sobbed and cried, the young member said. It's like losing a family member to treason. In hours of interviews, he continued to express admiration and loyalty to a man who may have endangered his young followers by allowing them to see and possess classified information, exposing them to potential federal crimes, and or having their fingernails torn out if they ever fell into the hands of foreign operatives who don't give a crap about their mental well-being during the pandemic, man. I mean, the likelihood of their being scooped up by Russian intelligence operatives when the stuff is out there in the Discord server is pretty low, but, you know, it does show a significant disregard for the safety of these kids, even from the federal government. Anyway, I figured he would not be putting us in any sort of harm's way, the member said, as the leopard ate his face. The exposure of the documents had severed friendships and cut him off from the man who buoyed his confidence and made him feel safe. Like a cult leader. It was very dumb of you, son. The member said that the stress of the loss, coupled with the enormity of the leaks, has left him worried and sleepless. Now he says he believes that the world should see the secrets OG passed along to a tiny group, even though the rule was not to show anybody. He argued that the public deserves to know how intelligence agencies spend their tax dollars, if that is in fact how they spend their tax dollars, because he lied to you about the false flag thing in Buffalo, but you don't seem to be able to, weigh that in your calculus, do you? That's weird. And he was particularly outraged that documents show... Where was I here? He argued the public deserves to know how the intelligence agencies spend their tax dollars, and was particularly outraged that the documents show U.S. surveillance of foreign allies. Oh, I see. He was standing up for the rights and sovereignty of our foreign allies. Sure. Now he's a whistleblower. I get you. Right. But what the young man regarded as a revelation will come as no surprise to the countries whose officials the U.S. has been monitoring for decades. While rarely discussed, except in newspaper articles about the subject over the course of decades, while rarely discussed and embarrassing for Washington when exposed, it's widely understood that the U.S. intelligence community monitors many friendly governments, just as foreign allies try to do the same. But, this particular 16-year-old learning this for the first time is outraged and is going to nuke the world over their poutiness, over discovering for the first time what has been going on for decades prior to their births. But, let's leave it up to you. Thousands of military personnel and government employees around OG's age working entry to low-level positions, high-level QAnon access, thousands of people just like this could plausibly have access to classified documents like the ones he allegedly shared, according to U.S. officials and experts who have seen the documents reported in the media. Despite what his young followers thought, OG would have had no special knowledge compared with his peers. He possessed no special power to predict events. Rather, he appears to have persuaded some highly impressionable teenagers, for no real reason, that he's a modern-day gamer meets Jason Bourne. The member said he's confident the authorities will find OG, but when they do, he won't be charged. All right. Instead, he believes OG will be imprisoned without due process at Guantanamo Bay or disappeared to a, quote, black site if he's not, quote, assassinated for what he knows, or he just, grows decrepit in an orange jumpsuit like he's supposed to. Anyway, but yeah, all fantastic international intrigue. You got to protect me because they're going to disappear me to a black site, and then maybe you too, so don't tell anybody. Don't tell your parents. You'll be the one in trouble. Don't tell your parents what I did to you, or I'll kill you. It's all very familiar. The member, as well as the OG follower who corroborated this account, found no fault in their leader's actions and instead said they blame the teen who posted the documents on the Wow Mao server for wrecking their community. I don't want anybody except you 25 kids to see this. Sure. Maybe we should have had better OPSEC. Tactical. Maybe we should have had better OPSEC, the member said, harnessing the jargon of military intelligence personnel for operations security, which I know not because I am cool and tactical, but because I've read a effing newspaper in my life. Anyway, he said he will not divulge OG's identity, yes, you will, or location to law enforcement until he is captured or can flee the United States. Okay. I think I might be detained eventually. I think you might be, son. I think there might be a short investigation on how I knew this guy, and they'll try to get something out of me. They might try to threaten me with prison time if I don't reveal their identity. Yes, they will threaten you with that. And you'll be lucky that they threaten you with only that, because other countries would tear your effing fingernails out, pull your teeth, shock your you-know-whats. And I mean, there's a word for them. It's easy enough to say. You could really be in for a hell of a time. And by the way, if you abscond with this information to another country thinking you're safe from U.S. authorities, I would be very careful about where you choose. They might welcome you with open arms at first because they figure you'll give them information. But then if you stop short of giving them what they want, they might try to extract more from you using different methods than you would be subject to in terms of interrogation here in the United States, despite the fact that you probably believe that we'll torture you, which, maybe we will, maybe we won't. I don't know. You never can tell when the world is so mysterious and, the secrets of the U.S. government are out there, but only for the knowledgeable to understand. It's good, should scare the crap out of you. All right. Well, let's see. To date, no federal law enforcement officials have contacted the young group member, asked why he was prepared to help OG even at the risk of his own freedom. The young man replied without hesitation, he was my best friend. Was he? All right. Was he real? Was he a real person? Was he a sting operation? I don't know. You don't know. Was he a chatbot? I don't know. You don't know. But it'll be interesting to see how this develops. And, just as sad, I'm sure, to counterintelligence operatives as this story is, if we regard the OG story to be a true one. I've seen it a million times before. They always think that they're coming up with this idea on their own, but in the end, they've always been manipulated into it. Because that's what intelligence agents do. They walk around looking to lay these traps. They lay them out there before there's even a target. So that when the target walks into them, the target thinks, this hasn't been written for my benefit. This was already here. It must be, on the level as opposed to being a trap. That's why would they lay a trap for no one in particular? Because they work and people walk into them. But no, from your own perspective, each individual has their own arc, their own story arc, and they don't regard the other story arcs out there as relevant to their own for whatever reason. And, same thing. It's also just as sad. Cult deprogrammers, no doubt, find this a very sad story. It's the same thing. They all think the guy's the best friend. And investigators of, child abductions and sex trafficking rings and what have you, probably also. Same thing. People who investigated what's his name over in Romania, same thing, probably see this story and they're like, I can't believe how often this works. What are you going to do? It's just, this is what works on 16-year-old kids. You can't make 16-year-old kids geniuses. They have to find out the hard way. Hopefully most of them don't get targeted. But when it happens, and it works for these reasons. And guess what? It's happening here too. Fascinating story that has taken us through 3/4 of today's show. there are other things that I wanted to share with you. Let's run through just a few of them. I mentioned to you earlier, and now we got to shift topics entirely. The Feinstein story is out there, and we really haven't discussed it much, but as I mentioned, I've been talking about it a little bit in the background with Joan. What's going on? As you know, Feinstein, not particularly well these days. And, possibly suffering from who knows what sort of condition that seemed to be manifesting itself in a kind of, if not dementia, certainly, old age forgetfulness and disorientation from time to time. She wasn't really effectively serving her term, but, proud woman and lots to be proud of, and it makes sense, and not willing to give up the seat of power that has made her who she is in the country and within the Democratic Party. But she's becoming ineffective. So there's, like, the last couple of days have been a couple of stories where there were House Democrats asking her to resign, looking for, when hearing the story about what must have been happening at the Judiciary Committee and holding up judicial nominations, which are so important, and people saying it's just too important to defer to Dianne Feinstein's ego anymore. And a fair amount of ego, certainly, but like I said, fair, not just a middling amount. It's a lot, but, she's done a lot in her life, and so it's understandable. And then we started to see stories like, first calls for her to resign, and then, of course, commentary on those calls for her to resign that was a little sharper and perhaps more bitter, as we see here in Jezebel. Kylie Chung reporting this under the headline, Dianne Feinstein is MIA and her absence is holding up judicial confirmations. The 89-year-old senator has missed 60 votes of the 82 taken in 2023 at a critical time for Biden to be getting judges confirmed. She needs to resign right now, is the conclusion of the subheader. And in the interest of moving quickly through it, I think you get the gist of things here. Just jumping down a little bit into the articles, questions about Feinstein's fitness to serve have followed her for years now, particularly since an unsettling moment in 2020 when she embraced Senator Lindsey Graham and seemed supportive of Amy Coney Barrett's confirmation to the Supreme Court, prompting questions of whether she even knew what was going on. It did worry a lot of people. And more incidents since. And so, like I said, some stories of calls for her resignation, or at least for her to step down from the Judiciary Committee if she won't resign her Senate seat. Let's see, a couple days following that one, here we are, New York Times with the headline from yesterday, Feinstein, under pressure to resign, asks to step down from Judiciary panel. In other words, her advisors and maybe she realized what was going on and said, well, maybe the compromise position here is we'll turn my Judiciary Committee seat over to another currently serving Democrat who can at least then help provide a functioning majority and a functioning quorum for the Judiciary Committee to be able to do its business. So, that's a step in the right direction, but will it be enough? Let me see what they have to say in the New York Times piece. We'll set this up as background before exiting into our third break, and then we can get to looking ahead on this problem, and then maybe switching gears for a few more stories here. The 89-year-old California Democrat who has been absent from the Senate for more than a month after being diagnosed with shingles, which, for anybody could be extremely painful, but for an 89-year-old could certainly be debilitating. But it could also be maybe not what's actually happening, but is a plausible excuse. I don't know. Said she would seek temporary replacement on the powerful committee. It's Annie Carney reporting here again for the New York Times. Senator Feinstein on Wednesday pushed back on calls for her resignation, but asked to step away from the Judiciary Committee indefinitely while recovering from shingles, responding to mounting pressure from Democrats who have publicly vented concerns that she is unable to perform her job. Ms. Feinstein, an 89-year-old California Democrat, has been away from the Senate since February when she was diagnosed with the infection. Her absence has become a problem for the Senate for Senate Democrats, limiting their ability to move forward with judicial nominations and pretty much everything else, I would guess. Remember that this comes while John Fetterman has been away, seeking treatment for his depression, although he's scheduled to be back, either now or fairly soon hereafter. There's also out there something I didn't mention the other day, but I happened to catch in passing that Dick Blumenthal apparently broke his leg recently, fractured his femur at what was he? He was at a parade, I think, right? And somebody was videoing him as they were walking along, and it's just a well-wisher, I think, who probably taking a video tripped and fell into Senator Blumenthal and actually, fractured his leg. And although that's not going to keep him away indefinitely from the Senate, it's going to certainly put some pressure on it. It's a hell to travel with a broken leg, I'm sure. So it might result in some absences, but between him and Fetterman and Feinstein and a razor-thin majority, that's going to get in the way of a lot of stuff you want to do.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I'm going to continue reading from the New York Times piece because I scrolled down a little bit to make certain that it sets up what I think we need to discuss beyond the fact that she's missed all these votes and the larger tactical picture here. So I'll continue on here reading that in recent days, as it became clear that Feinstein was not planning to return after a 2-week recess, pressure began to increase for Ms. Feinstein to resign. On Wednesday night, she said she would not do so, but offered a stopgap solution, saying she would request a temporary replacement on the panel. Well, those of you with procedural knowledge should already begin thinking about what this really means. She gives her statement. I understand that my absence could delay the important work of the Judiciary Committee, Feinstein said in a statement on Wednesday night after 2 House Democrats publicly called on her to leave the Senate. So I've asked Leader Schumer to ask the Senate to allow another Democratic senator to temporarily serve until I'm able to resume my committee work. And I guess, the casual observer and or perhaps members of certain Discord groups, you'd say, well, that makes good sense. Why don't we just have somebody else fill in for her? I'm sure that'll be fine. Well, I don't know. In a statement, a spokesman for Senator Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York, said the majority leader said that Mr. Schumer would make that request of the Senate next week. Now, here's the thing. Replacing Ms. Feinstein on the committee would require Democrats to pass a resolution, which would need some degree of bipartisan support, either the unanimous consent of the Senate or 60 votes. Why? It doesn't actually say why, and I think that's a very big disservice, given, 1, its obviousness, and 2, the ability to lay the responsibility for any difficulties in making this very simple swap that everybody just figures you could just do, because why not? Everybody knows that, right? Well, no mention of the filibuster. That's weird. What are they saying here? it would require either the unanimous consent of the Senate or 60 votes. Why would it require 60 votes? To pass a resolution? No. It would require 60 votes to shut down a filibuster of the resolution that would be necessary in order to make this temporary replacement, or any replacement, temporary or otherwise, would require an alteration to the adoption of a new organizing resolution, which the Republicans could block. Now, gee whiz, Feinstein's absence from the Senate is making it impossible for Joe Biden to put his judges on the federal bench. Now, why would Republicans be upset about or disagree with supporting a resolution that would make it easier for Joe Biden to put his judges on the federal bench, right? There'd be no reason. There's collegiality here. We're all senators. We're all serving the interests of the United States here. Is that not the case? Really, people? Come on. No, they're not going to just step out of the way for Dianne Feinstein. But she's poor and frail, and she's been their colleague for a long time, and certainly collegial affinities would be such that. No, someone's going to stop it. And if you can't find 60 votes to shut down the filibuster of an organizing resolution, especially, and would they filibuster an organizing resolution? They have in the past. They threaten to all the time. Sometimes it's too high profile for them to do. Sometimes it happens right at the beginning of a new Senate, and they threaten to filibuster the organizing resolutions and therefore hold up the work of all the committees. And maybe that's too much and too high profile. But now it's just one. And they can say, well, look, the reason Democrats are unable to do anything on the Judiciary Committee is that they made a huge mistake, and they've populated the Judiciary Committee with people who are unreliable, and that's their own fault. And I'm sorry, we're not going to help you out from this, or at least you're not going to find 9 of us to help you get out of this. No. And and also, but she's frail and she's recovering. Well, so is Mitch McConnell, and he's out, and you're not going to find us asking for any help replacing him anywhere. Well, that's because he's probably not serving on any committees, because I don't think either of the floor leaders do. But, we don't need anybody in order to establish a majority. We're in the minority, so it doesn't matter to us. There's nothing you can punish us with. So yeah, that's a huge problem. Unless, of course, they were to nuke the filibuster for such procedural stuff as organizing resolutions and committee seating. And look, everybody knows that the Democrats are in the majority, and they're entitled to a majority on each of these committees, just so long as the ratio of Democrats to Republicans on each committee is roughly in the neighborhood of the ratio of Democrats to Republicans in the full body. No one should object. Well, no one should, but suppose they do, because they are unfair, or they're jerks, or they just want to make trouble, or they just don't want to see any more Democrats appointed to the federal bench. And we know Republicans are reluctant to get in the way of appointing Democrats or approving of nominations made by Democratic presidents to the federal bench, right? After all, everybody jumped out of the way for Merrick Garland, despite the fact that they didn't like him very much. Oh, they actually did like him a lot? Oh, and they still didn't jump out of the way? Oh, yeah. So it's not so easy. And no, it's not a thing that Ms. Feinstein can simply say, well, why don't you just put somebody there temporarily? Well, why don't you realize that this is not really likely to happen? And that Republicans, by the way, can continue to prevent it from happening, and can continue to do so with impunity, so long as places like the New York Times state matter-of-factly that this measure would require 60 votes, without telling everybody that what this means is that Republicans would filibuster the mechanism by which Democrats ought, by all fairness, be able to replace an ill member of the Judiciary Committee temporarily with someone else, so that regular business can go on. Not so we can pull a fast one on Republicans and stuff the judiciary with tens of thousands of wild-eyed, leftist operatives. That's how they'll describe it. But just putting the regular nominees in place. I mean, But who could blame them? They're going to say, well, no, you're going to pack the judiciary with wild-eyed ideologues because, of course, we've caught them trying to stuff the judiciary with wild-eyed ideologues and said so. And so now they're going to be angry about it. And they're going to say, see, they're doing the same thing. And maybe they have a point, maybe they don't. But what they're not going to do, very likely, is get out of the way of making it and make it easier for Democrats to do this stuff. So, all right, could you nuke the filibuster on it? Yes, you could. What do you need in order to do it? Well, there you need a simple majority. But can you muster a simple majority when the breakdown of the Senate is essentially 51-49? Now, Mitch McConnell may be absent, so maybe it's 48 reliable-ish votes for the Republicans, but Dick Blumenthal's got a broken leg. Not sure how able he is to get back to the floor and vote, although I'm sure they can get him to D.C., but they might have to leave him in D.C. and just say, for your own comfort, you're not going to want to move back and forth between Connecticut and D.C. all that often. I don't know. Maybe he plans to spend a little extra time recovering. I'm not sure. John Fetterman, not exactly sure what his schedule for return is. And of course, Dianne Feinstein out. And then two of the other nudniks that are supposed to be part of your coalition of 51 are Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin. And it's never any fun dealing with them. So you got 3 Democratic senators who could potentially be out at any time for various health reasons, not to mention the fact that, everyone in the Senate is 800 years old and you could have another one join them at any point. Plus you got Sinema and Manchin to deal with. I don't know that they're going to be able to put together even a simple majority for a narrowly tailored nuclear option that says, all right, we'll still preserve the legislative filibuster, but we'll get rid of it for organizing resolutions, for committee nominations. And I think they could make a plausible case for that. I think they could even make a case for it to Manchin and Sinema and say, we're not going to do anything with this measure about the legislative filibuster. All of the things that you love for whatever reason about the legislative filibuster remain in place. All we're saying is the Democrats who have fair and square won a majority in the United States Senate need to be able to put a majority on each committee and be able to do the work that's necessary, the work that everyone expects us to do as the working majority in the Senate. And that includes on your committees where you need people to be doing the things you think is important or you think are important. I don't know. Anyway, is important. Anyhow, I don't know. I guess as long as they're not chairing committees that are that have their work bottled up because of absences, they could just say, I don't care. It's not affecting me. But I don't know. Maybe it is. We should take a look and see if that's the case on any of their panels and apply pressure as necessary. They might be willing to do it, but they're wacky and you never know. And anyway, the upshot of all of this is for all of the people saying, well, she should just resign, or they should speak to her in private and prevail upon her to resign, and Chuck Schumer should lay out the case. Well, what is the case that Chuck Schumer is laying out here? It would be best if you did step aside, because then we could maybe get a replacement named by the Democratic governor of California. And so the seat remains in Democratic hands. Yes. But then where do we assign them for their committees? And do Republicans stand in the way of our ability to do so? Until we can figure out that a solution is available to us and plausible and has a good chance of working, what do? We shrug and we look around and we say, we're working to figure it out. And ideally she steps aside, ideally for us, ideally for herself. But does it mean we have bigger problems in the Senate if she steps aside? And if that's the case, if it's bigger problems, do we want that? I don't know. So anyway, the article continues on. Is there any more insight in this one? I don't know. I think we probably gave you the insight you need to figure out, the real trouble behind all of this. But let's see. Right. It's not clear whether Republicans who want to hold up President Biden's judicial nominations would support such a measure. It's not. Ms. Feinstein has missed 58 Senate votes since February, and Democrats did not want to head into the spring and summer without the ability to move ahead on judicial nominations. And remember, that, too, requires now a simple majority. They have nuked the filibuster on judicial nominations, but you still have to muster a majority, and it's harder and harder to do when she's not there. Under the Senate's current rules, a tie vote on a nomination in committee, means it fails and cannot be brought to the floor. They could change those rules, but okay. I'm anxious because I can't really have a markup of new judge nominees until she's there, Senator Richard J. Durbin, Democrat of Illinois and chairman of the Judiciary Committee, told Politico last month. And he didn't have to tell anybody that among this audience. We knew. Ms. Feinstein, whose growing memory and cognitive issues have prompted mounting concerns among her colleagues, announced earlier this year that she would not seek re-election in 2024, but she said she intended to finish out her term. But her most recent health setback has pushed at least one Democrat from her home state to demand that she immediately step down. And not our favorite necessarily, but we need to put the country ahead of personal loyalty. Representative Ro Khanna, Democrat of California, who no doubt envisions himself in this seat, tweeted on Wednesday calling for her resignation. While she had a lifetime of public service, it is obvious she can no longer fulfill her duties. Not speaking out undermines our credibility as elected representatives of the people. He has got a point. A second House Democrat, Representative Dean Phillips of Minnesota, my son will be interested in that, echoed the sentiment in a posting on Twitter saying Ms. Feinstein remaining in the Senate was a, quote, dereliction of duty. Not necessary for somebody from Minnesota to go out that far on a limb and say that, but I guess that means he means it. The Judiciary Committee has planned a packed spring schedule. Mr. Durbin has announced a full committee hearing to examine the fallout of the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. Not to mention, he has also promised action in response to the ProPublica report that Justice Clarence Thomas has for years accepted luxury travel on yachts and private jets from a conservative donor that he failed to disclose. Much of that work could be complicated by Ms. Feinstein's indefinite absence if Republicans mount challenges and Democrats need votes to hold them off. Ms. Feinstein on Wednesday acknowledged that her recovery was taking longer than he had anticipated. When I was first diagnosed with shingles, I expected to return by the end of March, the March work period, she said. Unfortunately, my return to Washington has been delayed due to continued complications related to my diagnosis. She said that she still planned to return to the Senate as soon as possible once her doctors cleared her for travel, and she made it clear that she did not intend to resign. I remain committed to my job and will continue to work from home in San Francisco. Her desire to hang on to her post despite her health and memory issues has irked many of her colleagues on the left, but Ms. Feinstein has previously agreed to sideline herself amid concerns from her party. In 2020, she agreed to relinquish the top Democratic spot on the Judiciary Committee, gee whiz, amid mounting pressure from progressives who said she was not up to the task of leading a crucial panel at the forefront of the partisan war over the courts in a new Biden administration. And that's the end of the article, but of our analysis of it, and that gives you some sense of what Joan and I might have been talking about on the side of all this. The mechanics of this replacement aren't just, well, hell, it makes common sense to make the swap. There are real ways for the Republicans to screw it up, and the only ways to overcome the Republicans is with enough votes. And if there's a filibuster, you're never going to make it, unless you nuke the filibuster, for which you'd need her vote. So, it's not that great. Let's put it that way. All right. Let's see. A couple of follow-up pieces, but there's also a related story that I want to get to, and maybe we could save the related story. I don't know. It's been a lot about the spying today. First of all, a report thanks to the Tennessee Commercial Appeal. We have a local source to let you know that Justin Pearson has been reappointed to the Tennessee House of Representatives by the Shelby County Commission. Catherine Burgess and Lucas Finton reporting that for the Memphis Commercial Appeal, not just Tennessee generally. But there you have official news there, so that's good news, illustrated with a beautiful picture of Justin Pearson cheering his reinstatement. And so we look forward to great things there. Just wanted to let you know that actually happened. And now it's a done deal. Also, as a follow-up, I just thought this was kind of interesting. Just to fill in the picture, the Washington Post, Yvonne Winget Sanchez has this very interesting news from Arizona. They're getting in on the action, but in a way that you might not have expected. Arizona legislators expel a GOP member. Why? Over baseless election claims. This is actually a pretty good development, I think. The bipartisan vote amounted to a rare moment in which Republicans held one of their own to account for false accusations related to elections. That's the subheader. What's going on? The Republican-controlled Arizona House of Representatives expelled a GOP member from the chamber on yesterday, after an ethics committee concluded she committed, quote, disorderly behavior. That's why they expelled the two members of the Tennessee House. Same, general header here. But what's her disorderly behavior? Lying about false testimony. So 2 lies. Lying about false testimony given during a February legislative hearing on elections. The resolution to expel State Representative Liz Harris, which passed with bipartisan support, said her conduct undermined the public's confidence in the House, violated the, quote, inherent obligation to protect the chamber's integrity, and violated, this is a quote, violated the order and decorum needed to do the people's work. In February, a speaker invited by Harris to testify at the election-focused hearing baselessly accused Democratic Governor Katie Hobbs, Republican House Speaker Ben Toma, and Maricopa County leaders and local judges of accepting bribes from a drug cartel. Sure, why not? Right? The decision to punish Harris, a first-term lawmaker who represented an area east of Phoenix, amounted to a rare moment of Republicans holding one of their own to account for spreading false claims about elections and democratic institutions. Arizona has been a locus of baseless theories about supposedly fraudulent ballots. You, of course, remember the Cyber Ninjas, quote-unquote, forensic audit. The vote on Harris capped weeks of debate within the GOP caucus over how to handle the matter and followed last week's expulsion of 2 Democratic lawmakers in Tennessee who interrupted state house proceedings by joining protesters calling for gun control after a mass killing. The 2 Tennessee lawmakers have since been reinstated by local authorities. Arizona House members voted 46-13 to expel Harris, a tally that included 18 Republicans voting in favor. Immediately after the vote, she gathered her belongings from her desk and left the chamber as observers in the gallery shouted, "Shame on you!" Although it occurred to me that it could be like QAnon weirdos, meaning shame on you, the chamber, for doing this, as opposed to normal people yelling at Harris, shame on you for believing such dumb nonsense that you got yourself expelled. Toma, the House Speaker, who voted in favor of expelling Harris, told reporters after the vote that he was saddened that the chamber had to consider the matter. It's not to be taken lightly, and I don't think it was taken lightly, he said. Harris told the Washington Post ahead of the vote, "I didn't lie, and God knows the truth. The truth will come out." And I'll get a Discord server to put it there if necessary. In voting no, Representative Alexander Kolodin, Kolodin, sounds vaguely Russian, but I don't know, said expulsion, quote, sets a bad precedent. No, not in this case. The House Ethics Committee on Tuesday found that Harris was aware that an insurance agent that she for some reason invited to address a February 23rd Joint Elections Committee hearing would allege criminal activity. She knew ahead of time that he would come there and allege criminal activity and election fraud by various public officials. The 5-member panel asked House members to read their report and consider whether disciplinary action should be taken. Republicans will begin the process to replace Harris and send the names of 3 possibilities to the governing board of Maricopa County, which helps administer elections. The board must choose one of those individuals to fill Harris's seat. And I guess that was a particularly dumb thing for Harris to do, to accuse members of the Maricopa County Board of baselessly accuse them of taking bribes from a drug cartel or whatever the crimes were that she decided to do, to antagonize that local board, who would be given the opportunity to name her replacement if the House expelled her. Well, I mean, I think they probably green-lighted the expulsion, don't you think? And then they said, yeah, get rid of this loser and let us replace her with somebody else. Sure, that's a prospect we would love. Absolutely. Go ahead. She's a first-termer. We don't know anything about her. She hasn't done jack squat. She hasn't had the chance to do anything for us. So, expel her now while she's got no favorables and, let us pick a replacement. Yeah, do that. So interesting flip side to the story. And, I don't know, I guess, an easy target for them to pick too. And it lets Republicans walk around saying, well, sure, you're criticizing us for being anti-democratic, small d, and large d, capital D, for expelling the two lawmakers in Tennessee. But one, they got right back in. And two, we expel our own for, election lies, so, both sides, something. I don't know. Maybe that will, convince somebody. All right. Let's see. So other related information, other related stories. Oh, well, one thing we didn't get to, and maybe we'll talk about it a little bit tomorrow, was Tucker Carlson gave Donald Trump an hour on Fox News to blather and kind of debased and embarrassed himself in the view of people who, are taking in all the information, like the fact that Carlson allegedly told all the rest of the people at Fox News that he despises and loathes Trump, but then licked his boots for an hour. It was a really ridiculous thing. Trump said all the dumb things that you would expect him to say, and we could dissect some of those things. But I think the takeaway analysis most people have was that Carlson then sat there and agreed with every stupid thing that Trump said. It's, oh yeah, sure. You're totally hitting it right on the head there. And for a guy that he supposedly loathed and despised, gee whiz, that was a softball interview. But we'll get into that maybe a little bit more later on. I should also point out, that another piece of the puzzle in figuring out the Feinstein thing, all implied in our analysis of the Feinstein story, but, just so you don't, miss out on the full breadth of what we're talking about, Feinstein and others being absent. Philip Bump has a piece that ran yesterday under the headline, Democrats have had a 2-vote majority on only 30% of Senate votes, just so you see the impact broadly of absences from the Senate and maybe understand a little bit why things are slowing down and we're not getting things done day after day. By the time Georgia voters elected Senator Raphael Warnock to a full term in a December runoff, control of the Senate was already established. Warnock became the Democratic caucus's 51st member, joining 48 sitting or incoming members of his party and 2 independents. When Kyrsten Sinema left the Democratic Party to become an independent, and a few weeks later, the math still didn't change. The Democrats would come into the 118th caucus with a 2-vote majority. But it hasn't worked out that way. In the 82 votes cast in the Senate so far this year, Democrats have had an advantage among voting members of at least 2 votes, only 30% of the time. In part, it's because the party's caucus has seen 2 members, Senators John Fetterman and Dianne Feinstein, missing dozens of votes for health reasons. But in part, it's because only 26 of the 51 members of the caucus have missed no votes at all. The party's saving grace, a lot of Republicans have missed votes too. In fact, none of the 82 votes that the Senate has taken this year has seen every seated member casting a vote. On average, 5 senators have been missing or failed to weigh in on each vote. A senator failing to vote doesn't always mean they're absent, though it usually does. 6 votes had only 1 senator not casting a vote. That being Senator Robert Casey, Jr. of Pennsylvania, Democrat, of course, who missed votes on February 14th and 15th due to surgery for prostate cancer. Casey is one of 11 senators, 7 of them members of the Democratic caucus, who has missed at least 10 votes. you see what's going on here. And of course, we have, or Republicans have similar problems with their own conference. Mitch McConnell has been missing a lot of time lately after his fall. But I just wanted to throw that out there so that it's something you keep in mind, that's playing in the background of the decision of what to do, if anything, about Feinstein. Okay. That's about, we're kind of running into, the time pressures again, just about all we can fit into today's show. And of course, we'll welcome Greg back to the air tomorrow. So, we'll catch up on a lot of these stories. I guess the only other thing I'll throw out there, because it can happen relatively quickly, Vanity Fair has a piece that we can't read all of, and who knows whether you want to spend all that much time reading Vanity Fair. But you might want to read Vanity Fair's headline on this one. I just thought it was interesting. Lindsey Graham is the subject. Oops, I got to get this thing out of the way here. Now I'm going to have to go back to the pocket version. We should play our outro music too. Lindsey Graham hangs out with Mohammed bin Salman, Mr. Bonesaw, MBS, a guy he once called a, quote, beyond toxic murderer. Eric Lutz has written for Vanity Fair on this one. And the opening paragraph tells you kind of all you need to know here. In November of 2018, shortly after the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham called for sanctions against Saudi Arabia, we need to talk about them, and condemned Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who is believed to have ordered the grisly murder, as beyond toxic. On a Fox appearance, he said he could, quote, never do business with Saudi Arabia again until MBS was ousted. And he goes on to say, look, I fully realize we have to deal with bad actors in imperfect situations on the international stage, but when we lose our moral voice, it seldom works out. Now, it does mention Graham's moral voice was plenty hoarse by that point, of course, having cozied up to Donald Trump, the man he'd previously denounced as a race-baiting, xenophobic, religious bigot who would bring deserved ruin to the GOP and the country if it embraced him. But, he cozied up to him and learned to play golf with him. And, hey, by now, it turns out he's kind of cozy with Mr. Bonesaw, too. Just wanted to sort of throw out there the moral bankruptcy, once again, of Lindsey Graham. A good way to end the show. It's always proper to point that out, don't you think?
FromNetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, next up, of course, the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam. No need to head overseas to find a child bride, he reports, when you can just go to Missouri. And on the rest of the menu, wow, the Biden administration has opposed a HIPAA rule to update it and to protect the privacy of abortion seekers and providers. Very much needed. See you tomorrow.